Hello everyone, this is MJ with MinIO and welcome back to the MinIO and Kubernetes and MinIO Operator course. In this video, we're going to dive into the lab for deploying the MinIO Operator using the MinIO Kubectl Krew plugin. So this is all going to be command line driven, and we're going to completely deploy the operator right in the CLI. So this lab assumes that you already have the Kubectl Krew plugin installed. We'll leave a link to that in the description down below in case you need to install that on your system. But the first thing we're going to do here is, because we already have Krew installed on our system, we're going to run an update on that. That's basically going to update the local copy of the plugin index and show you all of the different plugins that are available for you. And so now that we've done that, we can go ahead and install the MinIO plugin. And you can see that it updated the local copy. And in my case, it was already installed because I was already doing some testing for this lab. But yours will likely tell you that it's going to go ahead and download that package and install it on your system, and now it'll be available for you to use. If you have installed an older version of the MinIO Kubectl Krew plugin, you can actually run this Kubectl Krew upgrade MinIO command, and it's actually going to upgrade that to a newer version. Now be careful when you're doing that, because you need to make sure that you're ready to move to the next version of this plugin, because some functionality may be different. So just be aware that you don't want to just go upgrading willy-nilly, because that might put you in a bad spot when you go to run certain commands and the plugin itself may have changed or deprecated or added additional commands that could be of use to you. So just be careful when you do that. So now that we've done that, we can actually see which version of the MinIO Kubectl plugin we're actually running. In my case, it's version 5.09. So next, it's pretty straightforward. We've got the correct latest version as of the recording of this video, and we want to get the operator up and running. We can simply run kubectl minio init, and that's going to go ahead and deploy everything necessary to get the operator up and running. Now, this is not tenants. Tenant videos are coming next. Those are completely separate deployment, but the tenants require this initial operator to be deployed on your cluster before they can be deployed. You can see here that it lists all of the different services that were created. It also gives you a little hint down here, just like we talked about in the slides previously, on how to use that proxy to actually access this environment. First thing we want to do now that this is all installed is to make sure that everything is actually up and running. So we will run kubectl get all namespace MinIO operator. Now you can omit the namespace MinIO operator because it will default to that. But if you've installed this to a different namespace, then you will need to specify the namespace in which you are running the operator. Otherwise, this will return not what you expect. So you can see here a number of things. First off, there are pods that are deployed up here. There's the console and there's the actual operator pods themselves. Note that one of these is pending. We're running a single node Kubernetes cluster on K3s here, and there are anti-affinity rules, which basically mean that this wants to be highly available. So it's actually deploying 2 copies of the operator out of the box, but they don't want to run on the same host, because if you lose that host, then you lose the MinIO operator. So the anti-affinity basically means that the requirement is that these 2 pods cannot run on the same host. But because we only have one host here, then one of them is just never going to come online. That's okay for the purposes of this and for testing, but in production, I highly recommend that you are running multiple control plane and worker nodes in your Kubernetes cluster so that you have the ability to take some failures and still have every service that you need up and running on your system. We can also see this created a number of services here. There's the operator, the STS, and the console service. And there's also deployments that are managing the console and the operator itself. These replica sets, as we talked about a long time ago in our sort of intro to Kubernetes, are just artifacts of the deployments themselves, not anything you need to worry about. So now that we've done this, we want to be able to access the web UI. So let's go ahead and see if our port forwarding proxy will actually work for us. So if we run kubectl minio proxy, because it's in the default namespace, I do not need to specify it. It's going to go ahead and start the port forwarding of the console UI and output our Java web token. So this is nice because you need this token to actually log into the UI. So now let's jump back over to our browser and see if we can use this JOT to log into our console. So here we are at our console. Because I have that forwarding turned on, you can see that it's recognizing that it's handling connections for that. And I've hit the external IP address in my case because I'm just running this on a VM in the cloud. and 9090, which is the default forwarding port for this proxy. And it's now presenting me with the opportunity to enter that Java Web Token that it showed you and put that in to actually access the operator console. So there you go. That is really all there is to deploying the operator with the sort of default configurations that you need. There are no tenants right now. We will get into that some later videos in this series. But for now, this is a very easy way to access this. But this is temporary. I want you guys to recognize that. So if I kill this because I want to run some other commands from my command line, and I come back over here, you'll note this page doesn't load anymore. So now that's a broken link. It's very inconvenient to have to go and run that command to be able to access this. So what we're also going to do here is to apply a ingress, because we have an ingress controller in our Kubernetes cluster that will provide some persistent access to this interface. So the ingress is not a MinIO concept. This is a Kubernetes concept. And so we're going to go ahead and, because our system's configured with ingress nginx ingress controller, we can go ahead and just configure a default Kubernetes ingress to be able to access this. So let's take a look at what that ingress looks like. So we can see here that we're defining the API version, which is required on all of these YAML documents for deploying Kubernetes artifacts. The kind is ingress. The metadata is the name that we want to call it. So in this case, we're just going to call this operator console. And the namespace specifically, because these are namespaced resources, has to be the same namespace as you've deployed your MinIO operator into. So if you chose anything other than the default MinIO operator namespace, you're going to need to update that namespace field. Then we define the spec. So the ingress class name that we're using here is nginx. That might be different on your system, so you may need to update that. And with our rules, we're defining a host. Now, in my case, I'm going to call the URL that I want to be able to access this on as minio-operator-console and then my domain name that I'm managing. I've already put that domain name in place and pointed that at this particular system. The next thing we need to do is define a path for the HTTP to go through. Basically, it's going to read the headers and say, once I note that someone has tried to visit that URL, then where do I pass this information to? So in this case, we're going to pass it to the service called console, and the port on that service is 9090. That's the default port that's exposed on that service. You can use the path style as just a slash. There's nothing additional necessary there, and the path type should be prefix. So simply by applying this, we will be able to access this in a more persistent fashion and be able to get to our operator console whenever we want. Go ahead and get out of here. And we'll go ahead and do kubectl apply -f and that operator console ingress YAML file. So now we can see that that is created. And if we come back over here into our browser window, you can see that I've put that in our URL bar here. So now you can see that this actually opens using regular HTTP. We have not talked about applying TLS. If you're going through your ingress to do this, then you will want to apply TLS on your own within your ingress, and you'll have to do that however that works for you. There are many different ways that you can get a certificate for your ingress. But in our case, and for demonstration purposes, we're just going to use the bare HTTP, although do not do that in production. Make sure you're using HTTPS secure communications. And the next thing we need is that Java Web Token that we got before. Now, when we ran the proxy command, that automatically gave us that JWT, but now we actually need to run a command here to get that again. So note that my shell here wraps around, and so this root at MinIO demo 1 is not part of the JOT. So if yours wraps like that, you'll need to make sure not to include any additional characters. Otherwise, your web token will not work. So I'm just copying right before the root begins all the way up to the beginning of that. And I'll go ahead and grab that and come back over here. And now I can log into my console UI, and I have a persistent link now without having to start the proxy every time. So hopefully that shows you both how to get the MinIO operator up and running using the Kubectl Krew plugin, as well as to configure persistent access to your cluster and your MinIO operator web UI. Thanks for watching this video. Please leave any comments with questions if you have any, and appreciate you watching. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll see you in the next video.